Good evening, curious minds out there around the world, and welcome to the Behind the Radio for Season 2, Episode 10, The Black Knight, Decoded. As always, I'm your host, DJ Joswa, and tonight we're going to endeavor to untangle a bit more of the messy lore surrounding the object that has come to be known as the Black Knight satellite, as well as a slight return to the investigative news portion that we used to always do, as we dig into a few recent news stories and see what is really going on out there, and if there may be a little bit more to some of those than what we're being told. First things first though, how are you guys doing this evening? I truly hope that your holiday season is going well for you so far. How am I heard you ask? Well, I'm doing okay. Definitely staying busy. For those who may be unaware, I also own a separate mobile DJ business, and from late August through December, we tend to stay busier than usual. This year, we've also had a pretty wild summer as well, so to be honest, this entire year has been pretty active, which is great. It beats the alternative for sure, but I'm admittedly a little wore out at this point, which has contributed to the more sporadic schedule for the show, and I apologize for that. Good news is there will be one more main episode this month, as well as a pretty exciting finale, hopefully, for New Year's. And then, just one more little break until we get Season 3 underway, which I'm very excited about everything that we have in store for that. If you're new to the show, or the last main episode was your first time joining us, I want to thank you for checking us out, and hopefully sticking around for this BTR. We are very happy that you're here. This is an absolutely incredible community of listeners, and genuinely some of the nicest and most interesting characters you could hope to meet. I would also invite you to join us on Discord, Facebook, X, and occasionally even on Truth Social. Just search Clandestine Radio, CRP, or Joswa, and you should be able to find us. The Discord link is on the Facebook page as well, and I post exclusives in there for most of the episodes. And I always host like an open Q&A basically during the episode premieres, and then I'll stick around for another hour or two just to respond to any that may come in afterwards. Plus, if nothing else, I have some amazing admins over there. I have to shout them out. And usually someone either from the team or listener base or myself is around over there to hang out with. Big things are planned for that channel, and you're going to want to be one of the early joiners, so just be sure to check that out if you can. Speaking of, you are amazing listeners. I have our Spotify Wrap for this year, and while it doesn't include any of the RSS feeds for any of the other streaming services that the show's up on, none of those numbers are actually counted in this, but the Spotify numbers alone definitely exceed my expectations. So as our first order of business tonight, let's just quickly go over that and then some extra info on the BKS, and we will wrap it up with some news. So, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, here we go. That sound is our 2024 wrap. And 2024 was a big year for the show. I set out with a goal of releasing more episodes, higher quality episodes this season, and definitely hit the first mark. I'll leave it up to you if the quality also improved. The basic Spotify metrics were that we were up plus 184% listeners, which is amazing, a plus 363% episodes streamed. Thank you for that one. And a plus 153% followers, none of which would have been possible without all of you guys sharing and recommending the show and helping to grow it. 78% of our total listeners found the show this season, which is a massive growth indicator. The most streamed episode was, drumroll please, That didn't sound like a drum. That was the worst drum roll in the history of drum rolls, and I apologize. Episode 6, Part 3, The Dark Side and the Cabal, Architects of the New World Order. Really glad that people checked that one out, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. It was definitely a labor of love to put both of the 3-part series that we did this year together. Very research heavy, and with that one especially, I had to weed through a lot of baseless or at least unprovable conspiracies in order to get to the heart of what was really going on in that story. And it was pretty dark in places, so I sincerely thank you for the support there. It means a lot. Somehow, that one was streamed 198% more than the average episodes. The largest jump in listener base was with the 55 and up age group, which increased a whopping 300%, so thank you all you grown and sexies out there. We added 5 new countries, and now officially being streamed on every continent except the Arctic and Antarctica, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me, considering how all this started. I don't know what I need to do to get the polar bears and penguin demographics involved, but it's definitely on my to-do list for next season. Aside from this show, our listeners most listen to number 5, Danny Jones' podcast, number 4, Morbid, number 3, Mr. Ballin podcast, number 2, the Necronomipod, which is a great name, and number 1, the Joe Rogan Experience, which is really no surprise there, considering he has the most streamed podcasts literally every year. That list tells me that you all have amazing taste, and I'm truly honored that you take the time to even put us in rotation with so many great podcasts out there. This was 30 people's most streamed show, which is crazy to me. It was in the top 5 for like 28 more people. The quote-unquote top fans, as Spotify says, listened in 4.5 times more than everyone else. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are well loved and appreciated for that. They also analyze your show to determine what type of creator you are, whatever that means, with them saying that my creator personality was the storyteller, which I suppose checks out. I hope that they didn't waste much resources determining that one. Finally, last but not least, our show rating, based on your incredibly kind reviews, was a perfect 5 out of 5 stars, which really helps us to get more exposure and to be suggested by Spotify more, so that one is also greatly appreciated. If you haven't, by the way, I never plug this, but if you do enjoy the show and you haven't already, then clicking 5 stars up there on the Spotify page, it really does go a long way for us, and it's greatly appreciated. Alright, so let's get into this last episode for a minute. I feel like I did a pretty decent job of breaking down the information during the show, and I tried to debunk what I could, either after each of the sections or at least by the end of it. So I don't want to spend a ton of time going back through the episode and trying to point out everything, but we'll just do a quick little rundown of things and I'll share my opinions on it. As always, this is a BTR, so if you haven't heard the episode 10 yet, this may not make a whole lot of sense to you until you do it. So I always recommend starting there and then just coming back to this one whenever you're finished. At least for this part. The first often cited evidence for the Black Knight is the Tesla signals. Tesla definitely reported picking up some sort of signal during his experiments up in Colorado, so that much is true. Generally speaking, people today think that those were likely just quasars or something like that. I glossed over that point in the main episode because I really didn't want to get too bogged down with it, but I figured it might be helpful in ruling this incident out for you if I explained at least a little bit about what that actually means and how that works, and what the hell a quasar actually is. Without dorking out too hard here, let's just start with radio waves. Yes, they are responsible for that music that you can pick up on your car, AM or FM stations, but those are a very particular type and not what we're talking about really with quasars. Radio waves have the longest wavelength of anything in the electromagnetic spectrum, and they can drastically range in size, from about the size of an American football or so, all the way up to the size of planets, and some have even been larger than that. It was Heinrich Hertz that first proved their existence, whom we actually discussed in our Tesla episode earlier in the season, so I won't bore you too much with explaining all of that. And instead, I'll confuse you and probably bore you with how radios work, and then quasars. Radios allow you to tune to a specific wavelength or a frequency in order to pick up signals that are sent out by a radio tower. The radio receives, hence why they're called receivers, or they were, at least back in the day, those electromagnetic waves, and then it actually converts them into mechanical vibrations within the speaker in order to produce, essentially, the sound waves that you hear. So basically, they convert electromagnetic waves into sound waves, is another way of thinking about it. That I'm sure is totally not equally confusing. Anyways, any astronomical object with a changing magnetic field can produce a radio wave. The sun emits radio waves all the time, so do many planets, Saturn famously, Jupiter, just to name a few. Sun sends out radio bursts caused by the electrons that are ejected into space during solar flares, and those things shoot out at like 20% the speed of light. So they're flying out of the sun towards us pretty much all the time. Without trying to get into particle versus wave physics or how radio waves versus optical waves behave and why radio telescopes are better for detecting faraway objects and other things that can't be viewed as physical objects. For example, if you wanted to view or find a black hole, or say remnants from the birth of the galaxy, or stars that went supernova long ago, you're going to have to use a radio telescope. They can also detect quasars, so what is a quasar? I hear you asking. Well, the name is short for quasi-stellar radio source. The first ones tended to emit mostly radio energy, and they most resemble stars, which is why they earned that name. Quasars are very energetic. Some emit like 1,000 times more energy as the entirety of the Milky Way galaxy. So back to Tesla. How was he picking up quasars? In Colorado Springs, he had constructed like a first of its kind high sensitivity receiver that he was using to try to investigate the electrical properties of Earth. This is when he was really into trying to get the world to work as a conductor in order to send wireless power. It was designed so that it would beep each time that he picked up a subtle change in voltage in the atmosphere. It was so sensitive that he was receiving atmospheric static from lightning strikes like 1,500 kilometers or 932 miles away. So one night, he's sitting alone in his lab, and he starts getting this succession of beeps. He was able to rule them out as being disturbances from the sun, aurora borealis, earth currents, or any atmospheric disturbances. So, Tesla, being Tesla, decided that it had to be extraterrestrial in nature, presumably from Mars. Subsequent experiments by several others have suggested the signal could have been frequencies in the lower VLF range, which can penetrate our ionosphere coming from radio-emitting planets like Jupiter or Saturn. This is based on the fact that by using a device very similar to that of Tesla's, signals coming from Jupiter will occasionally be received in a similar series, and provided the device is set up also to beep in a sequence of beeps, like beep, 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 and so on. While this theory, much like the quasars theory, has yet to be officially proven, they seem to at very least be much more plausible than signals from a dark satellite, at least in my opinion. Now, as far as a satellite in retrograde polar orbit goes, that one is really tough to definitively say one way or the other. I mean, sources are pretty scant, and so much time has passed at this point that it also comes down to if you believe Donald Kehoe or not. I did, of course, file FOIA requests in hopes of seeing what, if any, documentation was available within the government archives. 2 of those requests came back with nothing, and one just directed me to the CIA's Black Vault site, saying that all available info had already been previously released under FOIA. Some of which I've included in this Discord chat, but it's a massive document dump. As far as direct references to the Black Knight goes, everything I found pertaining to its use was as a code name for other things, and not to any alien satellite, though. The Black Vault is basically just all of the UFO files that have been declassified. To be honest, there was just too much there for me to go digging through in any kind of effective manner within the time frame that I had. But if you've got the time and you're bored enough, then I'll go ahead and put a link in the Facebook page and in the Discord for anybody who's curious. And as far as Duncan Lunan and his little translation that he did that allegedly points to Epsilon Boötis, I would have to see more than what I was able to find in order to say one way or the other on that one to be real. It's just so convoluted, and there are so many articles going back and forth on it that I personally don't put a ton of stock into it. I try to leave the door open though, and I'm open to being proved wrong. In the immortal words of that poster on the wall in X-Files, I want to believe. I just haven't seen any convincing proof of his theory yet. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, which, aside from things that I fairly well explained or gave my thoughts on in the episode, only leaves us with the photos. The photos are really the wild card in all of this to me. Like I mentioned in the main, none of those photos look, to my admittedly unqualified self, to show anything like a thermal cover for a trunnion pin. Again, I'm probably not educated enough in that particular area to make a call one way or the other, but personal opinion here, that's not what whatever that is looks like to me. Overall, personally, I have to admit that I feel like the Black Knight satellite mythos is mostly just a series of disconnected events that have been twisted and shoved together to fit a narrative, one that relies heavily on conjecture and assumption. I admittedly can't completely disprove it with the evidence that I have, but I don't feel that anyone, for now at least, can prove it either. So you be the judge. If you believe in it, I don't see any harm in that. And if the evidence is there at some point to prove it, then I'll gladly listen to it. So now that we've covered the main, let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of news, shall we? Alright, feels good to be back to the news. Our opening story this evening centers around the recent events in Syria. And I've had several people reach out, ask me my thoughts on the situation, and to be honest, I didn't have much to tell them other than I would look into it. This has been an insanely busy week for both myself and the news cycle, so it's had pretty well fallen to the bottom of my to-do list. Also, there's the fact that Syria has a rather complicated history up to here, and all of that would honestly have to be considered in order to get a real grasp on, much less try to explain, what is actually going on and why. Not only that, but if what you're seeing seems familiar, that's because it is. In reality, this is just the latest example of foreign powers getting involved to oust a supposed evil dictator. Dictator gets killed or is captured and then killed, with any history of the so-called freedom-loving, democracy-spreading countries responsible for backing the coup, tolerating, trading with, or sponsoring said dictator previously just conveniently forgotten or erased. There's jubilation in the streets, all is right with the world, and finally, said country is liberated. Yay! Promise of regional stability, democracy, and peace is all you'll hear, and the issue is that it is virtually never how it actually goes. Typically, particularly with CIA-backed coups, of which there are countless examples, democracy comes in the form of the illusion of an election, while in reality, very often, a stooge, just as bad as the last, that is sympathetic to, or at least willing to play ball with, the U.S. is installed into power, while we turn a blind eye to whatever atrocities may follow, so long as they bend the knee and kiss the ring when they're told to. Sometimes, as with Libya in the 2011 NATO/CIA intervention that was used to take down Muammar al-Gaddafi, who was brutally murdered in the streets. I suggest you never find that video and watch it. All we have heard was how for 4 decades he had ruled with an iron fist, and that by removing him from power, it would ensure that the Libyan people had secured themselves a strong and democratic future, free from the dictatorship of the past. And stability and democratic development would be the future of the area. In reality, what followed was an explosion of jihadi fundamentalism like never before, and the hodgepodge of unsupervised, anarchically disposed militias assisted by NATO intervention quickly took over, the killing, torturing, kidnapping, and vanishing of people, and ripping what was left of the country apart, leaving the fragments to be gobbled up by rival coalitions backed by various countries since 2014. I don't think I even need to tell this group about the result of the Iraqi invasion under the false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction and lies, babies being tossed from incubators to justify removing Saddam Hussein, who himself was put into power in '63 thanks to yet another CIA coup that ousted General Abdel Karim Qassam. That coup, of course, led to the 1980 US-backed Iran-Iraq war that lasted nearly 8 years and left over 1 million people dead. Saddam was a leading member of the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party. Remember that. It'll come back up. Why am I telling you all this, you might be asking? Because it is important to get a full picture of Syria and what is going on over there. We'll get there in a minute though. Just trying to keep all of that in mind for later. To get an idea of what just happened, we need to first go back to the late 40s when the Syrian government refused to allow a U.S. oil company to build a pipeline through its territory. We all know how that works out. Washington already looking for reasons to undermine the anti-Western Communist Party there, and with concerns that the country was slowly moving even further to the left, or because, oil, the CIA went to work making plans to overthrow its civilian government after just 3 years in power. So the CIA would meet with right-wing military leadership in Damascus and laid out plans to install a, quote, military-supported dictatorship, end quote. 47 and 48, they would try to influence the election by backing the Nationalist Party. In March of 49, the CIA would sponsor the first Syrian coup d'etat and was directly involved. In 1957, a joint team of CIA and MI6 operatives would plot to assassinate 3 top Syrian leaders and overthrow its government, yet again, by using agent provocateurs to launch a series of incidents funding a Free Syria committee and arming paramilitary and political factions. Where have I heard this before? In 1963, the Syrian coup d'etat, Part 2, Ba'ath Party Boogaloo, would take place led by the military committee of the Syrian regional branch of the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party. Are we seeing a pattern yet? One of the key participants in that coup was Hafez al-Bashar, who would soon become the 18th president of Syria in 1971. Hafez held the position of regional secretary and secretary general of the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party from 70 until 2000. There's a rather complex history with him, but sticking to the point of all of this, after his first 2 choices didn't really work out, Hafez would choose his son Bashar to be a successor, something that was openly opposed by members of his party that didn't support dynastic succession, and many others who criticized it, noting that Syria was not a monarchy. Hafez would die of a reported heart attack on June 10th of 2000 at 69 years old, and his son Bashar would assume power shortly after, going from a gawky ophthalmologist who studied medicine in London before to marrying a British Syrian wife who worked as an investment banker at JP Morgan, all the way to being the anointed leader of Syria. Fast forward to the period of 2006 to 2011, just prior to the onset of the Syrian war, the U.S. State Department began secretly funding Syrian opposition groups and other opposition projects. March of 2011, the Dara protest movement on March 17th and 18th had all the hallmarks of a stage event involving Western intelligence, and possibly Mossad, supporting Islamic terrorists with rooftop snipers targeting both police and the protesters. A technique that is done to accelerate the violence, and you see that pattern repeat a lot in history. By August, Obama and Hillary began calling for Assad's removal, and since the months of resistance proved to be ineffective, the U.S. would begin sanctions to weaken his regime and undermine his ability to finance his military. By 2012, Obama had authorized an additional clandestine support for Syrian rebels. In October of 2013, the CIA would begin expanding its secret efforts to back and train opposition fighters in Syria, after concerns had been floated that moderate U.S.-backed militias were losing ground in the country's civil war. ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, you guys are going to have to forgive me. I have no idea how most of these names are pronounced. I don't watch TV, so this is all from my reading and doing the best that I can over here. Anyways, ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra fighters, building on experience that they gained in the Iraq War, have ties to Al-Qaeda, a CIA cutout basically, would begin carrying out attacks against Assad's government. By 2014, the CIA was secretly training fighters in Jordan as well, and in 2015, those CIA-backed, trained and equipped fighters would re-enter Syria through the southern border with Jordan to join the fight. Why would we do all of this? Well, there are several reasons. Some are the same used to justify the likely CIA-backed Arab Spring in order to establish U.S. dominance in the region, cutting off Iran's intentions to do the same. Another is the U.S.'s tendency to bow to all things Zionist Rothschild and unquestionably support Israel, and to remove the Russian influence from Syria, among others. Essentially, sticking our nose in everyone's business, cooing countries around the world, and empire building, what the U.S. does best. Now, for today's affairs. Israel has been trying to lock down its grip on the Golan Heights region of Syria, a strategic position that it took from Syria in '67 during the Six-Day War and has held by military occupation ever since. The U.S. has been working to overthrow Assad and further cement its control of the oil found in its northeast region, an area with a reported minimum of 9,000 U.S. troops, while the U.S. is both helping the jihadists in secret while decrying them openly. Then there's Turkey, who is no fan of Assad. They're active in the area and most likely also providing support to the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, jihadists, which we will definitely be referring to them as moving forward. Russia recently withdrew from the region, evacuating its airbase there and presumably closing ranks in preparation for the next wave of the NATO-Ukraine conflict, which has opened the door for the remaining foreign powers in the region to facilitate an HTS offensive that saw Bashir's weakened government driven from the country, with Bashar narrowly escaping to Russia, or at least according to the most recent reports, which pretty much brings us up to speed on what's going on in Syria. The leadership of HTS is taking control of Syria, and we will have to wait to see what the remaining foreign powers decide to do with all of that. My gut tells me that it's probably going to blow up in the U.S.'s face massively before all is said and done. And in our second story, I'm going to talk about the United Health CEO Brian Thompson and the perfect suspect. Unless you've been living in a cave since December 4th or so, then you have no doubt heard the sordid tale of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson being gunned down outside of an entrance to the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. You've also probably heard of his accused killer's manhunt that led to the arrest of Luigi Mangione. I don't watch news again, so I just read and research, so that probably isn't the correct pronunciation, but it's fun to say it that way. Please forgive me, Italy. Well, I've been intensively digging into this story this week, and there are more than a few strange anomalies and possible connections in it. A lot of which I haven't fully been able to flesh out, so as to not come to you guys with some half-cocked or potentially flawed theories that I can't prove yet, I'm going to just refrain from getting too deep into it all at this point. Some surface things that I feel are fair game, though, would be that he supposedly boarded a bus to New York 2 to 4 days before the conference that Thompson was attending was publicly announced, only to later do what is being called as a planned killing. He does the crime, allegedly, then vanishes, spends like a week undetected, just to be caught by an oddly vigilant McDonald's employee because he was acting suspicious while using the Wi-Fi. Cops show up, he doesn't make any attempt to escape at all. Instead, this quote-unquote bright student that's said to have like a 130 IQ just gets caught by police sitting on his laptop in possession of the quote-unquote ghost gun, as in it turned CEOs into ghosts, the fake IDs that were used to check into the hostel that he stayed at, and a freaking handwritten manifesto. Could it get any better? And I'm not saying that it isn't possible, or there is some grand conspiracy that's going on instead. I'm just saying that it seems really convenient is all, and a little weird. The entire thing is weird. The guy in the surveillance photos also has wide apart, seemingly well-maintained eyebrows, unlike Captain Caterpillar that's in the arrest photos. Maybe a week of avoiding cops was enough time for that thing to crawl back between his eyes, but I don't really know, to be honest. It looked odd to me. Not just the caterpillar, the comparison, I mean. There's also a laundry list of tangential connections between the CEO, Paul and Nancy Pelosi, and Caterpillar Boy, like several, and CEO Brian Thompson was being investigated for insider trading and fraud at the time. Something Nancy knows all about, am I right? Luigi also comes from a wealthy, politically involved family from the same area as old Nancy P. That's what I call her. we're homies. I'm still doing the legwork on this one, and I'll get back to you with whatever I uncover. If you happen to have anything, though, you can send your tips to clandestinradiopodcast@proton.me, and I'll look into it. Not just this case, though. Send whatever you have. Anything that you want me to look into or have covered on the show, and I'll check it out. And for story 3, I'm going to have to take a slightly more serious tone, because our top story for today is an extremely disconcerting one that's coming to light out of the Congo. If you'll recall, and especially if you follow my personal pages, probably a year or so ago or more, I started warning about how the next pandemic was already in the works, and they were running the simulations and wargaming it under the name Disease X. I also said, even way before I knew all of that, and before the last scamdemic was even over, that this was a dry run to get people conditioned, to gauge reactions, and to get the jab into as many people as they possibly could, for whatever reason. I said the next one would target the children, because parents will, understandably, do whatever they have to, take whatever they are told to, and submit any and all rights without question if they feel that they'll be protecting their children in the process. It's the one weakness that they can go after that will compel the largest group of people to get in line and go along. Nothing puts fear in people like the thought of something happening to their kids. Recent developments out of Africa's Congo DRC region has caused a still somewhat localized panic, but there's growing concern as cases continue to pile up. The epicenter of the outbreak, according to the African CDC, is within the Panzi Health Zone, approximately 700 kilometers southeast of Kinshasa, which is luckily a remote area where the approximate 200,000 residents or so are spread out across 7,377 kilometers. What they are currently calling this is Disease X, and it has now infected at least 400 people and caused somewhere between 35 and 40 deaths at the last check. Although the only ones they're counting as a confirmed death are ones that happen in a hospital and not at home, and many more are assumed to have happened so far but haven't been counted. This mystery disease is particularly devastating in children, with an abnormally high death rate within that group. Multiple teams have been dispatched to the region in an effort to get a better understanding of what exactly is happening and to study this disease with the African CDC, the National Institute of Biomedical Research, the National Public Health Institute, and other entities including the WHO, along with other foreign health agencies sending teams, all working in conjunction with local services to determine the cause and true impact of this outbreak. Symptoms reported have been flu-like in nature, including fever, cough, fatigue, and a running nose, but it seems to progress fairly quickly. Many children in various regions of the U.S. have also been exhibiting signs of a similar nature, with many parents saying that this is the sickest they've ever seen their child, and with symptoms that seem to last an abnormally long time. While no testing is available for this Disease X yet, and no confirmed cases outside of this region have been reported, it may be something to just keep an eye on nonetheless. I'll be watching the situation closely, and I'll report back with any major developments. I don't say any of this to raise alarm bells or to freak anybody out, and I'm not saying that it's going to turn into a global, worldwide pandemic. But I do find it very concerning that a disease called Disease X, which is exactly what they were wargaming about, has popped up affecting the exact group that I knew they would be going after next. So I'm just saying, maybe keep an eye on it. And here at the end, just because that last story was admittedly a little heavy, I wanted to tack on something a little bit fun. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the reports about these drones that are supposed to be like the size of a car, have these lights all over them. They've been spotted all around New Jersey. Very interesting. I probably don't know anything more than you guys do. I've very minimally looked into these things, but so far the clearest photo that I've actually seen of these things is coming from the UK and not New Jersey, which leads me to believe at least that it's not a localized phenomenon. A lot of people have said that they think that they're some sort of military drone, some sort of new stealth technology, because these things apparently don't make any kind of a sound. There are a lot of military installations around New Jersey, but there's also a lot of lights on these things, which would, at least to me, lead me to think that it's probably not a stealth drone. They're not very stealthy. A lot of people have noticed them. One of them apparently was following along, or a car their family was in was following underneath it, one or the other, and their clock changed time. And then once they got separated from the drone, the clock returned to its normal time. Of course, that's an anecdotal account. I don't have any proof for that, but I found that little piece of information kind of interesting. There isn't a ton of like time dilation and weird time jumps like that. You'll see that some in UFO reports. It's not, every one of them or super frequent, but you will see that, particularly in like abduction cases more than anything. I found that to be an interesting detail that kind of also leads a little bit away from it being just some military technology. Along with the fact that the clearest photo that anyone has gotten to date came from the UK, actually. Which I don't know if you guys have seen that picture, but it is very impressive. It's probably the clearest photo that I've ever seen of a quote-unquote UAP, UFO, whatever you want to call it. It's got very interesting looking geometric type lights all under the underside of it. Very easy to notice though. Again, nothing stealthy about it. It was taken by an amateur photographer who was out just taking pictures of the sunset at the time and happened to notice it. He said he thought it was like a helicopter or plane at first, out of the corner of his eye, and then once he got to looking at it, he realized it looked nothing like any of those. So he took a couple of photos of it, and then apparently this thing disappeared by shooting straight upwards at a really high rate of speed and disappearing, which is also something that UAPs have commonly been reported as doing. So all that information is very interesting as well. I don't know what to make of it as of yet. Like I said, I haven't really been able to dig into this. I've had too much going on, working on these other stories and episodes and stuff. But it's something I'm also kind of trying to keep an eye on. And if you guys have anything about it, know anything that I don't know, please share it with me. I would love to hear it. You can also leave things in the comments. I forget to say this, but the comments on the Spotify page, those really help. Believe it or not, they really help. When people will see those, it drives up interaction. It makes Spotify see that more people are actually paying attention to the show and wanting to interact, so they tend to push it a little bit more. So if you have a second, if you want to, throw something in the comments as well. But that's it. That's pretty much all I had for that story. I just wanted to go ahead and put it here at the end to kind of lighten the mood a little bit before I got out of here, because I know the last story was a little heavy, but we got to cover it. We got to cover everything that happens that I think is significant and not getting attention like it needs, or is being misreported in the mainstream media. So there you go. There's your fun story about aliens, maybe. And with that little bit of butt-puckering news, that's about all I really have for tonight. Like I said, it's been a crazy week around here, but there is at least one more episode coming this season sometime, so stay tuned for that. Christmas is coming up, and for all of us who celebrate that, I just want to go ahead and wish you the best one yet in case we don't speak again before that happens. I've got lots in the works already for next year, and it should easily be the best season yet. Don't forget to review the show, use the polls, and leave me a comment if you would. I really do hate to harp on this kind of crap, but it honestly does help a small show like this tremendously. And it's totally free, and it's greatly appreciated. So there's that. Just stay safe out there this holiday season. Theft, hacking, and fraud always seem to go through the roof this time of the year. That's it. That's really all I got for you. Go enjoy the rest of your evening or morning or day or whenever you listen to this, and take care of yourself. Look out for one another if you can. And I'll talk to you all again real soon on the next Clandestine Radio.